Good afternoon. At this afternoon's Intelligence Forum's Who Are You podcast, we're very pleased to have Mark Levell, founder of Levell's and a brand strategist and also, may I say, design director. Mark, thank you very much indeed for the interview today. Can I start by asking, what has been your professional journey up to now?
Thanks, Harry. Thanks for inviting me on. I was thinking about that the other day, about what has led me to where I am. And as you know, a lot of us in life, we start off at art college, and everyone goes there to form a band, don't they, and try and make it in the music industry. So after that failed, and I had to start working, I got my first job working freelance, just doing bits and bobs for anything that came along. And it was from one of those jobs that led me to my first proper job in the real design world, where I was lucky enough to meet a guy called Paul Kilvington, who ran Kilvington's at the time, who was very up and coming, very sort of the next thing in design as a company. And I worked with him for a good several years and learned so much off him that I thought, I want a bit of this. Be a little bit like him, have the nice car and the nice clients. And I left and set up Levell's. With Paul's blessing as well, and we, still worked together at that time. Um, and Levell's, we seemed to find a niche in um, in the arts sector for some reason. So that was probably our foundation at that time. We were doing a lot of arts marketing, and back in that day, it was obviously like adverts in newspapers and um, programs, etc., etc. And that led us into designing and marketing and branding Symphony Hall, which led us to a prestigious project in Greece where we helped design the Athens Concert Hall, all of their branding and marketing. And from there, we just seemed to grab the odd, really nice corporate client. We were at Jaguar Cars, Jaguar Land Rover, worked with a lot of SMEs in Birmingham across all sectors, um, manufacturing, AI, manufacturing and technology, manufacturing in audio, manufacturing in jewellery, and we also did quite a lot of professional service as well, looking at solicitors and accountants. That gave us a real understanding of having to think outside the box every day, but in different sectors, because they were all challenging in their own way. Um, and from there, we grew quite large, and I took on a partner and formed B1. That didn't quite work out, so I then went probably about 2012, 11, 12, went back to Levell's again and regrew that. I think what it was, I just didn't want to be a massive consultancy. I think I was quite happy in the way we had positioned ourselves, being quite niche, quite boutique. And I think the main reason was I just love to be hands on. I don't think sitting back in that sort of managing director role just suited me. Um, Suited my sort of makeup and my creativity. I just want to be hands on still. So here we are today, and still going with the vowels. And after what, probably 35, 38 years, still here, and
Well,
thankful for it.
Mark, in your evolution and in the growing of the Bells, was there a period in your earlier working life that's had a very, very profound effect on your later work?
Yes, back, I think there's a certain point in life where you learn something or you experience something in it, it stays with you and helps mould you. So I would say one of the first things, when I left college, I just could not get a job within the industry. It was quite hard at that time, and a lot of my friends weren't getting jobs and falling out of the industry and into new industries. And what really turned it for me was when I couldn't get a job, so I went to sell books, encyclopedias, and stuff like that for a book company, door to door. That's what I had to do. What I learned from that, so the first day I got dropped off on this estate in the middle of Birmingham somewhere, and there I was knocking on the doors, and no one was really engaging at all. I had one guy that sat with, chatted to him, and yeah, signed him up, but really no engagement. And that when that day finished, apart from being a real downer, it made me realise that the problem was I was actually selling to a demographic I did not know. So it was very much people who probably couldn't afford to enroll into a book club. So I had a word with my sort of line manager and said to him, look, you're putting me in the wrong area. I need to be in a more affluent area where I understand how they live, because obviously I come from that background. And the next day they dropped me off, and within the first morning I signed up 12 of these people. And I knew from that point that for me personally and in design, you just have to make sure that your message and what you're putting out there is to the right audience. So that was the first thing. And if you don't know something, then get someone in who does know about something rather than try and tackle it yourself or find the workaround. The next one was with Paul when we're looking enough to I was lucky enough to be part of the team, although in the background, sending Range Rover into North America. And that was a similar analogy, really, where to sell that car into North America, which was way below par on the technical side of things compared to the Jeep deal we had out there, is that the Americans wanted to buy into the English gentry lifestyle. They wanted the red phone boxes, the chocolate box houses, and the hunter's boots and barber jackets and the home counties feel. And they felt if they bought into that, they're having a piece of Britain, as it were, and it made them feel really good. So it's a cultural thing. So I think those two episodes made me realise that design is very much about culture and how you put the story across and how well you tell that story, and it has to be relevant. So I'll say those two are probably the most impactful things that I still carry through to today.
Now, if I've read this correctly, in 1965, I love dates. That was a good year. So in 1965, your family moved from Bristol to the Midlands. You stayed largely in the Midlands, if I'm not mistaken. And what are the draw factors for you on a commercial basis? What made you want to stay? And I'm not questioning that because I've got doubts that you should. I'm just curious. As a son of the Midlands myself. So, what were the factors that made you, stick with it?
When I heard that question, Harry, when you told me about it a few weeks ago, I thought, I don't really know how to answer that one. And then my daughter said something to me in conversation. She actually said to me, because she is obviously a Birmingham girl and lives and works in London, and she said to me, Birmingham is so thriving that I would say learn in Birmingham, but learn in London, but build in Birmingham. And I just made me reflect a little bit, and I had a fantastic youth in Birmingham, So obviously it was a time when the likes of Duran Duran were coming through, and a lot, and in Coventry with all the two-tone stuff and the specials. It was a fantastic place to be at that time, and I think I just got sucked into all of that. Tried London to get jobs and things when I couldn't, and I just hated it. I know some people actually love London, and I personally just couldn't get on with it because the culture in Birmingham and the talent that was there at that time was so great that it was just where my heart was, I suppose, where you lay your house. Um, and we have a lot of culture in Birmingham, as we all know from the mix of people who were there. And I think Birmingham has done me very well over the years. It served the company well. We've worked with some fantastic organisations within the region. And I think because of that, there's been no reason to go and, try and find something new elsewhere that probably doesn't even exist. So, yeah, I'm grateful for Birmingham, that it's given me that sort of, that, I suppose, settlement and grounding that maybe if you do move around, you never find. But I've been lucky enough to be part of something and seen the city grow into something, still very proud of.
Certainly, Birmingham and its surrounding areas, including the Black Country, is no stranger to successful businesses.
No, and also it's the people as well. You can't take away how kind-hearted they are, And I'm not just saying that because it's a nice thing to say, but it's very true, I think a lot of the culture here do wear the heart on the sleeves, and I think that makes a big difference.
Now, in your putting your professional hat on again, so when if you can actually call this, so if there is a common theme when people come to see you for your advice, what generally do businesses have as shortfalls in their branding and marketing? Is there a common factor that you can immediately identify?
I think there is a common factor. I think there's probably three that when I was sort of thinking about that question and what actually is it that people come to you for? The people who come to us obviously have marketing challenges, no matter what it is. But I always found that a lot of companies and business tend to be very reactional to market conditions. So therefore, they'll almost try and change themselves due to how their market is actually functioning. So if it's not doing very well, we must have a rebrand. If it's doing well, we don't need to do anything. Whereas if they actually stuck to their plan and believed in their plan when they move forward, their brands and their communication will just get stronger and stronger. So I tend to find a lot of organisations, like I say, are a bit reactionary, not proactive, and therefore that's why they get into marketing challenges, because they don't seem to settle. They just seem to react to a situation within their industry. So that's the first thing. I think that unsettles any long-term plans or goals. And that leads into having a strategy, but most importantly, align it to business goals. Don't just have a marketing strategy that's not aligned to your business. And so marketing runs off in one direction and the goals are another direction. I think the whole of the business at board level, from marketing straight the way through to vision, needs to be very much aligned. And then that way, just stick to it. And yeah, by all means, deviate a little bit, but stick to that plan and you won't go far wrong on eventually building a brand that becomes very noticed and very successful. And then the final one, a lot of companies tend to do, is don't have much depth to their brand. So they can't, what I call, constantly promoting wallpaper. So, oh, that looks nice, that sounds nice, but there's nothing behind it, so it falls down after a few months or so. Whereas if you really dive into the depth of a brand, really understand what that brand is about, try and find that golden nugget that makes them different to everybody else, and then work on that along with culture, along with the plans, etc., you won't go far wrong then. So all what I call quite easy fixes in some ways, but they do take a lot of time to actually get and mine golden nuggets out and get the tone of voice working right. But once all that's up and running, marketing then should be, quite good fun and rewarding. And someone once said to me, Mike, you're at the sexiest part of the industry, being in design and creative. And that's very true, but I think you can only get there once all those fundamentals that we take for granted are put in place. And then it becomes fun and exciting, and we can start experimenting more, but not until all that foundation is there. So yeah, I would say.
So another question. You're basically sitting at your desk and the phone goes and somebody wants to talk shop. They want to place an order. What is the work you most like to hear down the telephone that you're going to be doing?
I would have said back in the day of being quite young, I just wish that big brand would phone us, or I wish we could get in front of that big brand. Because back then, when you're quite naive, you think that the bigger the brand, or the well-known that brand is, that's a great feather in your cap. But having been there and done that, I would say the challenge for me now is really their challenge, their marketing challenge, whatever that may be. Because straight away, you've got to put your thinking cap on and start diving deep. And also not just saying, not a client saying, or we would say to a client, oh, we think you need a new website, or can I have a new website? And to me, it's all about strategy. And again, I learned this from Paul, a phrase, stick to knitting. So there's no point trying to be the best of everything. So if someone comes to you wanting a website, and if they just say I want a website, there's always going to be that question why. And it normally ends up it's not the website that's the issue anyway. It's something else. It's communication is the issue. So anything where I have to mine out that golden nugget is great for me. And then once that's done, I love to direct film, photography, content, narrative, direct that content to what we've actually mined out. So those two for me are probably the challenge. Not the challenge, they're probably the work that I love to engage in now. Because it makes you think, and each challenge is so different. Although a lot of them are still connected in a similar way, each one is so different from the last.
So you're also, I mean, clearly in what you're doing, art plays a large part. As you've already said, you're at the creative and the sharp end of that side of things in your industry, but you're also an artist in your own right. Tell me about that.
At art college, like a lot of people back then, it was all about wanting to become an illustrator, where you could go out in the world and design a book jacket or an album cover, as well as illustrate it. So looking back to that time, it's a bit like saying now, I play football for the local team on the park and I now want to play for a Premiership club. That's the analogy I have to give now, not knowing at that time how tough it was to get into that arena. Because at that point, there were no computers, everything was done by hand. So it wasn't just your skills, there's a lot of good illustrators out there and creative artists and things. So as much as I really wanted to do that, it had to go on hold. And it sometimes cropped up in the work that I was doing, especially in the early days where you had to illustrate something to get a message across. And all that went on hold until COVID came along. When we had to work from home and not go in the office, and a lot of our work, because it was events based or internal communication based as well, sort of just suddenly stopped overnight. And I thought, oh, you know, I'm going to go mad here if I can't do something. So I had a long chat and with myself and started to illustrate again. And from there, it led to me on a real roll of coming up with a few nice themes, getting those going. So I set up the art site, thinking I could work that hand in glove in my day job. But of course, work comes back, that falls away again. So I do it as an outlet, not so much now. I'll get back into it because it's just a time thing. But I learned a lot from doing that. I learned a lot of how your mind thinks when it's in another box, but in an associated discipline of the sector. And it also gave me time to think a lot when I was doing that work because it was quite, my brain was quite relaxed. It wasn't having to find a challenge or find something that made a difference to an organisation or an individual. It was about expressing myself, and it gave me a chance to think about shaping the company from that moment. So yeah, so it's almost by default I got back into being an artist. But love that moment, and no doubt I'll get back into it at some point.
Well, at the very least, you're working in an industry where your creative talents and art talents are always wanted nearby. So
They are, and I
positive
think
thing.
going back to being in Birmingham, I think walking around Birmingham, there's so much. If you actually open your eyes and actually look around and people watch, there's so much inspiration in Birmingham. So whether you are in graphics or an artist or in other sectors, there's so much you can learn from just people taking things in. And yeah, as you say, Harry, being in the creative industry, you're never going to be short of ideas. Sitting on a park bench, having a coffee, just watching the world go by for an hour. You know.
Brings me to the last question. Whilst you're very much back in the driving seat, clearly, you've had a bit of a period where you've had to take a bit of a back seat for a while, and in that time, you've had time to think. Now, it can be said time to think can be a good thing or a bad thing, but I think in your business life that it's probably had a very positive effect. What have you changed, or what thoughts have you had when you came back to that driving seat from your enforced time out of it? What what inspiration have you drawn?
I think one of the first things is that, and obviously not by choice, and you know, anyone who's gone through something like that will know how tough it is. I think when I was lying in hospital, you also get so much time to reflect. Um, and the one thing that kept pushing me through, put family to one side, because all that's a given, was my work. Um, you know, made me think about we're here, you survived, the business is surviving. So what are we going to do different when I get back? Which has only just been the start of this year, really. So 18 months out. And, you know, I honestly couldn't find a lot to change because the process and everything was in place. We were doing well, although now it's become a lot tougher, obviously, for various reasons. it was more about, I think, not letting relationships and personal connections slip away and fall away. That human loyalty is so needed in a spell like that, as it is in your work. You know, you have loyalty to your clients, loyalty to your staff. So it made me change thinking that when I come out and start moving forward, we're going to have much more of personal contact with clients and new business. Because I think you tend to forget that COVID forced us to a way of working which we were unfamiliar with, and everyone thought, you know, everything's going to collapse. But on reflection of COVID, which is quite similar in some ways, because I was obviously housebound, it made you realise that you have to connect on a human level. And what I mean by that is one-to-one. Shake someone's hand, look me in the eye, feel their warmth and everything. Not just do everything over a Teams or a Zoom and have that as the norm. And there's a balance for that, so of course I know that. So I think the main change has been, look everybody, just talking to the team, we need to get out more and to show our faces, because we've become so used to working a certain way that we need to almost, I'm not going to say be different, because a lot of companies do that, but maybe not to the point of what they could do. So I would say it's changed more so we can get out and have that more human and personal contact. And I think by doing that, it will expand our network base and get back to how we used to be prior to this incident, and be more about, I don't know, just connecting more. I suppose just connecting more on that human level, and finding, I think as well, younger people to connect with. It made me think, because because the way we work, we do have a core team of designers and management team, and then we'll buy in a certain discipline. So I always believe that you need the best in the industry at any time of your project. And it's more about, I think now, and the unfinished business I was talking about earlier is, yeah, the company, I still want to build it up, but to a point where there's probably a much younger team moving forward. So when I eventually step to one side, that can still carry on and grow into the next phase of Levell's, whatever that might be, but still have very much a helicopter-driven involvement. So I would say the main thing is, Harry, on what will be changed is just more, I think, human element, touch, drive, you know, of meeting people.
So, Mark, I'm just going to say one thing before I go, and forgive me for it.
No, that's okay.
I'm going to firstly thank you for this interview very much indeed. I would also like to thank Christina Check for engineering it. Thank you for your time, Mark. It's very much appreciated.
Absolutely love it.
And I can't resist this little story. So you make me think of this story. So Donald Campbell wants to do 300 miles an hour on water. He's standing by Lake Coniston with his engineer, Leo Villas, allegedly, reputedly.
Yeah.
And there's a bit of a problem with the engine on the boat, as he called it. And they prevaricate. And then Donald Campbell asks his engineer, will it do 300? And the engineer says, no, we need a new jet engine on it. Okay, so if we get a new jet engine, will it do 300? Well, the boat's only designed for 275, maybe 250, but it'll probably just about do it. And then he turns to Donald Campbell, which reminds me of your conversation now. And he says, look, he said, you know, you've had the world speed record, you've had the world land record in 1964, you did them both. You've got to give up, you know, some time. And then Donald Campbell turns and comes up with this beautiful line, which makes me think of you. Yes, but but not this time.
Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, my time isn't yet.
So anyway, keep on keeping on, and thank you very much indeed. A great privilege. Thank
No,
you.
thank you, Harry. Appreciate it.